As I said, today we'll be talking about the national social climate plans in Central and Eastern Europe. We know that some of you have been very active in their development, others maybe not so much. We'll give you a good overview today, I think. We'll have several experts who have been very active on the issue. And if you have been too, we're also keen to hear your perspectives in the end. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Adam Harmat. He is Regional Climate and Energy Lead at WWF Central and Eastern Europe and heads the EUKI project BioJust, and he will be guiding us through today's discussion. And then, Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Levin. So I'm also welcoming all of you on behalf of WWF Central and Eastern Europe. I don't want to really waste our time on emphasizing how important the social climate plan is, but we all know that considering the minimum available national funds that has to be allocated over the 6 years, so from 2026 to 2032, and also the many affected households, transport users, and small enterprises, the development of the national social climate plans has to be very thorough and consultative. And only 110 days left until the deadline of the submission. So it also means that this discussion is really timely, and I really hope that you will gain useful insights from this webinar. First of all, I would like to briefly go through the agenda of today. So first, we will have Mr. Andrea de Murta from Trinomics, who will give a presentation on the technical support initiative of the social climate plans. And then we will have a panel discussions, letting us to deep more in-depth to country situations in Slovakia and Czech Republic. And then, as Levin mentioned already, so we will have then an open discussions in our last section. So without further ado, I would like to ask Andrea to give its presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Brief introduction. So my name is Andrea de Murtas. I work for Trinomics. We are an NGO environmental consulting company. We work across Europe, and in this case, we have won an assignment for DG Reform to support 9 member states with the preparation process for the social climate plans. I've prepared a few slides just to describe our work and the results so far, and some of the insight that we have gained by working across 9 member states and by working in close collaboration with authorities at the European Commission, but also at the JRC. So I'll try to share my screen. You should be able to see it now. Let me try to go. Okay, so briefly speaking, what is this project about? So the objective is to support 9 European member states. You can see on the screen: Romania, Denmark, Belgium, Croatia, Czechia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Slovakia, throughout the process to prepare their social climate plans. Now, as part of this project, we are now halfway through the assignment. We have already basically completed the first part of the work, which was about setting up an understanding of the plan, of the requirement of the regulation, and understand what the impacts would be in each one of the 9 member states. To date, we also supported the national authorities with setting up the consultation strategy with stakeholders and citizens, which is a process that some have already started actually even last year. Now, the current phase of the project is about developing the measures that should be proposed as part of the plan and analyze their potential impact in terms of to what extent they are able to achieve the objective of the regulation, but and overall to what extent they are able to mitigate the impacts of ETS2 on the energy and transport poor and on the vulnerable. Briefly, presentation on the methodology. You don't need to understand the detail here, but from a technical side, we work in 4 phases, and you see that the 2 chunky one in the middle are where actually the majority of insights are developed. Now is rather complex, a lot of interaction, but this I think is one of the insights that I can bring to you today, which is the complexity of understanding what ETS2 is gonna cause across the different group of citizens and enterprises, and what is the best way to mitigate these impacts. This project, Trinomic is the lead, but is actually part of a bigger consortium. There are 15 plus organizations. We have presence in all 9 member states involved. And plus we have a overall team that supports these 9 country teams with topical expertise, with modeling expertise, and in general coordination and advice. So this brief introduction of the process. Now let's dig down on what we learned so far and what does this mean for the member state and for social climate plans of these 9 countries. But I think a lot of the lessons are actually applicable across the board. So as part of this first part of our work, before we could start looking at the impact, we work with national authorities to clarify the definition of energy and transport poor, vulnerable household and transport users, and vulnerable microenterprises. Now, this is an incredibly important part of the process because the way in which you define these groups then affects how you're going to measure the impacts on them and how you can develop measures to address the impacts on these groups. Now, I will delve this aspect towards the end of the presentation, but it's incredibly important to really understand who is affected and to what extent this is aligned with the definition and with the requirement of the regulation. One way to work with from definition to measure and to estimate of impacts is to develop some indicators to measure the impacts of ETS2, but also of the impact of the measure that are proposed as part of the plan. Some indicators are part of the regulation, but also we developed some that we thought would be more useful to really understand how the definition, how the groups in the definition are then affected by ETS2. Brief note on the methodology. In order to quantify how many households, how many transport users would be affected and to what extent, we have put together a complex system of modeling tools created and run by the 3 partners that you see on the slide. So EUKI Institute, ICP, and E3M Modeling. And the idea of these 3 different suites of model is to try and delve into different aspects of ETS2 impacts. This analysis is then supported by qualitative and quantitative analysis carried out member state by member state based on national data. So we merge an overall approach that ensures some consistency with some tailored analysis to really dig down on the specificity of each member state. So what have we learned so far in terms of looking across the 9 member states? And I must say apologies if I do not explicitly name too clearly some of them. Is a matter of obviously confidentiality and is a matter of the status of this project, which means that the results are still being validated and quality assured. So before these are definitive, I'm not authorized to share, but I think what I can offer is still pretty good for the purpose of this seminar. So based on an analysis, we think that overall, and based on the methodology that was agreed with the European Commission, the ETS2 will have a rather limited impact on households and micro enterprises. Now, we try to estimate this impact in terms of absolute terms, so increase in energy expenditure, but also in relative terms, what does it mean for different cuts of the population in terms of increase. The majority of countries, we're talking about a few hundred euros per year, which basically we try to put this in relation to total expenditure for each household. And generally, we found that this is below 1% of total expenditure. As part of the modeling, as I presented the previous slide, we also look at ETS2 as part of other policies the member states are supposed to be implementing during the same period. So, and in this case, the impact is actually negative. So there should be, positive the other way around. There should be a net saving for the majority of households across different income and expenditure deciles. It's important to say that what I'm talking about here is that our analysis, which is based on a fairly rigid methodology, and we talk about average impacts across deciles or across different groups. So, individual household, individual transport user can possibly be affected more than that, but understanding having an average helps to, let's say, understand the overall impact of the scheme, which is what we were looking for at this stage in the process. We also look at specifically to vulnerable groups. So we saw all the population will be affected to a limited extent, but what about the vulnerable groups? For example, what about the energy poor or those that are at risk of being poor? What about these the micro enterprises which have substantial energy expenditure? Again, we found, let's say, limited effect. It's not insignificant, but it's rather limited. So it's not anything that we expect will have a significant impact on the majority of household transport user micro enterprises, but in some cases it can be important. And based on how you define thresholds, we see also some, let's say, important cases. For example, some up to 10% of micro enterprises may be considered vulnerable in some member states. So we presented this analysis to member states with obviously detailed results, some figures, some quantification of the indicator that I discussed earlier. And now we are at the point where member states needs to work with us to understand what are the best measures that they can put in place to mitigate these impacts on the affected groups. So to do so, we went through a, let's say, process, fairly standard process. So we started from the EU long list already present in the Commission documents, and then we tried to tailor to the country in question. Then we arrive at a short list. We perform an assessment of the short list. And now we have a first selection of the measures that we are analyzing so that national authorities can decide if they want to include them in the social climate plans. Is a significant amount of work. So we have already considered 225 measures in total, and now we're looking in detail at over 140 across the 9 member states. So is a significant amount of work, and is complex, and is a tailored process because every member state has its own specificity, has its own, say, political direction and so on. And so now we are really trying to develop this measure to make them fit to address the impact and to the national circumstances. What I can give you is a overview of what type of measure are member states, the 9 member states, more interested in. And you can see from this chart already a good comparison between the short-listed measures, or those measures that we suggest could be a good fit for the countries, and those that, in agreement with the national authorities, we've now selected for for analysis. So there is a good mix between transport and building targeted measures. So you see quite a lot concerning zero emission vehicles, several about energy efficiency, change of heating technology or renewable energy, while for mobility, we do have zero emission vehicles, which seem to be quite popular across, but also there is quite some effort in public transport, active micromobility, on-demand, and so on. We also have a few cross-cutting measures, so such as consumer awareness that is supposed to really help vulnerable household and user to access these possibilities. And we also have, so far, we've seen a limited use of direct income support measures. I can also give you some, let's say, best practice, and this is also based on some insight that the Commission gave in terms of what type of measure seem to be fit for the purpose of the fund and seem to be a good fit also in terms of addressing the impacts of ETS2. Unsurprisingly, you see a lot of potential measure that goes towards energy efficiency, so either financing the measure themselves via grants or either via providing a facilitated form of finance, so which via guarantees, via attractive interest rates, and so on. There is also some more targeted measure, for example, very interesting, the Latvia one targeted energy service companies. And when it comes to transport, EV are also in this list, but the particularity of this best practice is about a lease contract restricted to very efficient vehicles and for vulnerable individual in particular situation. Yeah, I would mention the last one because the last one would qualify as part of the direct income support measure, for which we know that the regulation has some strict requirement about. So direct income support is allowed under the fund, but it should be targeted to the impacts of ETS2. So it's not just, let's say, money to be spent freely, but it's rather allowances, for example, for public transport, is allowances for paying energy costs and similar. So it makes it the way in which this measure is structured must demonstrate that is addressing the impact and not simply providing funds, such as given that there are other instruments which are supposed to provide for this type of support for vulnerable households. A couple of general consideration based on let's say the conversation so far with national authorities, but also with the Commission. So it's important to say that the objective of the fund, which are stated in the regulation, are going to be very important at the moment in which the Commission will have to assess the plans of member state. So the social climate regulation has some rather strict eligibility criteria for the measures in terms of who can receive them, in terms of what type of measure can be, and in terms of the monitoring and administrative identification requirement. And so it's not the measure per se that could be good or bad, but it's also the way in which this measure, the detail of this measure are actually defined. So indeed, the key challenges are the targeting and compliance with eligibility, but also the criteria such as DNSH. Targeting has to support the energy poor, transport poor, and vulnerable users and micro enterprises. So when it comes to individual measure, this can be relatively straightforward. So having some entry requirement, for example, in order to access a grant of a support scheme, there will be some entry requirement, which could be based on income, which could be based on household composition, which could be based on the location of the households. And so that can be set up in a relatively straightforward way. And we are trying to understand the way to do this effectively. So, for example, targeting those households that are already in receipt of, for example, other benefits could be a simplified way to define access to the funds, part of the social credit funds. However, many member states are considering collective measures, for example, public transport infrastructure. And in this case, the targeting requirement becomes a bit more challenging to demonstrate, because in this case, it's necessary to demonstrate that the users that will benefit the most are, again, those which are targeted by the regulation. And this is not insignificant. So accessibility to public transport is a big factor in determining transport poverty and vulnerability, especially in rural areas. But there should be some mechanism or some analysis that demonstrate that the bus is actually going to serve the majority of, to support the majority of mobility needs of the targeted groups. I would say I will have just a quick slide to conclude, and then I'm not sure if we're opening the floor to question now or later, but happy to take some. So some reflection to date, based on conversation and how the project has gone so far. I must say it's been a rather complex and challenging process, especially, well, due to the coordination of so many entities across Europe, but also because the Social Climate Fund introduced a lot of new concepts that member states do not had not really integrated in their understanding or in their data. So we had to break quite a lot of ground in terms of filling gaps for these new concepts, such as vulnerable micro enterprises. You know, what are they? This is a new concept that simply it didn't exist. So you need to create the concept, look at how these micro enterprises are affected, and then put in place measures which are targeted at them. It doesn't seem a lot, but there are actually a lot of administrative, analytical, bureaucratic requirement that needs to be put in place. And again, this focus of the plan, this is really what determines how good a measure is. Can it really address the impact of the plan? And can it make it in a way that respects all the criteria, as well as in an efficient way? So obviously, we're talking about spending a lot of money, but it has to be distributed across a large part of the population that may be affected. So you want to do this in an effective way. Also important to reflect that our analysis is based on averages, so average cost for certain expenditure decile, for certain income decile, for certain location, for example, rural households or urban households or a particular type of families. Now, there would be situations where some household or user are affected above this average. So this is why having not only the measure to help in place, but also the means for them to access, to know about these measures, that's also extremely important as part of the plan. We've seen already several measures in terms of advisory, but we also have the fund allows member states to look for technical assistance exactly to help on better targeting the measure, better reaching the affected households, and again, avoid that the funds becomes a burden for those that cannot bear it. this was it for me. I hope that I managed to stick to the time. Adam, shall I give the floor back to you?
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. It was a very useful presentation. I think it's well represented that how complex this whole process is and how many question marks has to be answered throughout the process. So thank you so much. The idea is that we don't have a Q&A right now, but I encourage the participants to put questions into the chat. And then later on, so after the panel discussions, we can answer those as well. So please, if you have any questions, then put it into the chat. So let's move on to the next section about the country insight. So here we would have specific national informations of the process from two countries. So once from Slovakia, we have Juraj Melichar with us from Friends of the Earth, Slovakia, and also Zuzana Vondrova, representing Center for Transport and Energy in Czechia. Unfortunately, we have a slight change in the agenda. You could see that we also expected Linda Zuzev from Green Liberty from Latvia, but unfortunately she got sick, so it will be only two insights. But then again, so you will be welcome to share your thoughts from the other countries in the third section. So welcome, Juraj and Zuzana here. First of all, I would like to ask your overall experience so far. So I have like three specific questions to you. One is regarding the drafting process. So how was your involvement and how you assess the process so far? What are those main challenges or even good practices that you would like to highlight? And how was was it any kind of national consultation opportunities so far? First, I would like to give the opportunity to Zuzana, and then we can move on to Slovakia. Zuzana, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me well. Hello, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. So hello, my name is Zuzana Vondrova. I'm from the Czech Republic, from a Center for Transport and Energy, and I've been working on the just transition topics for about 60 years, and now I focus on social dimension of climate policy in general, I would say. So not only coal regions, but also social and climate synergies. And maybe first of all, I would like to give you a couple of information about what's the process in the Czech Republic. So there have been two working groups established by Ministry for Environment about a year ago. So it is working group on buildings and working group on transport. NGOs have actually two representatives in each of them. And actually those bodies provide platforms for discussions on which measures are supposed to be included in Social Climate Fund or Social Climate Plan. Newly, there is also a Social Climate Fund platform for a broader spectrum of stakeholders, including me and including NGOs. However, this is purely a consultation platform only, so we don't make any decisions, we don't vote. There is also a closed platform on Social Climate Fund just for officials, ministries, and decision makers. And finally, there is also official platform for transposition of the energy performance of buildings directive. And the main objective is to produce an energy poverty definition. So this is really, I just wanted to mention this because it's quite, close topic to the Social Climate Fund. The last one actually is led by the Ministry for Industry. I would say that the process has both bright and dark sides. The positive aspect is that the Ministry for Environment is willing to have a discussion with various stakeholders, including NGOs, and listens to our thoughts. We had also a couple of meetings with representatives of NGOs and with responsible officials in ministry. However, the negative aspect of the process is that the crucial thing, and namely the target group addressed by the Social Climate Fund, has not been decided yet. When it comes to timeline, the ministry would like to stick to the June deadline, even though the political reality and time schedule, meaning that we have elections in Czechia quite soon. And also it's expected that the European Commission may want us to edit social climate plan after we submit it in June. So, but still ministry would like to make it. And let me just maybe have one more comment or regarding the challenge. When it comes to the biggest political challenge, our government hasn't adopted the ETS2, obviously, which is fundamental thing. And we will, as I said, we will have an election this autumn, so the situation may theoretically change. However, I don't think that it is realistic that it will be priority of the new government. So let me stop here, and I'm looking forward to have a discussion with you.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Juraj, please, if you can also give some insight from Slovakia.
Good morning. Thank you for invitation and the space to also present our insights from Slovakia. Similarly, that in Czech Republic, there is insufficient transposition of ETS2 into the Emission Trading Act in Slovak legislation. Last summer, it raised relatively absurd questions like if you can spend money from Social Climate Fund without transposing the ETS2 into the legislation. So we were wondering about it, and even the Ministry of Environment submitted the propositions of the ETS2 legislation in buildings and transport sector and also Social Climate Fund, but only the Social Climate Fund and some ETS2 reporting remained in the legislation finally. So the far-right populist government members withdrew the parts of the ETS2 legislation, so we may lose in Slovakia 245 million euros for the Social Climate Fund if we start the Social Climate Fund in 2028, not in 2026. So it's a significant portion of the money for the period of the upcoming years to solve the energy and transport poverty. In terms of participation, a lot of social economic partners are not aware about this fund. It's not very discussed by the government. The ministries do not spread the information. But on the other hand, the technical support instrument experts really did a great job with putting together data, creating comprehensive tables, analysis, and so on. What I'm a little bit afraid is the data overload from the TSI experts, that there is still potential for ministries and state agencies to explain to the regional, local, and other stakeholders that what can this solution mean, or how it looks like, and so on. In terms of the question, like if Slovakia is online and would be on time, there is a timetable for the participatory discussion very roughly outlined. We had chance to participate in a very good workshop organized by the technical support instrument experts in February. There is a new website which has this information uploaded, and they also want to organize 2 events of the with local, national, and regional stakeholders in April and May. And to finish it by end of June, which just yesterday the representative of the National Implementation and Coordination Authority said at a similar discussion which we had in Slovakia. And but the question remains, like just yesterday, the European Commission urged Belgium, Estonia, Croatia, Poland, and Slovakia to send their final updated national energy and climate plans. So Slovakia still 8 months after the deadline has not submitted the updated national energy and climate plan, which also has to connect and be compatible with the social climate plan. So we are afraid that the political cycle, which really had negative impacts on a number of expert capacities in the state administration, because a lot of experts, especially from the Ministry of Environment, have been fired. Even people who have been there for years, for decades. So it's very problematic. And we will see that the 5 member states now have months to remedy the situation, to submit the final updated national energy and climate plans to the Commission. Otherwise, the Commission might decide to refer the case to the Court of Justice of the European Union. So we are a little bit skeptical that Slovakia will manage to get the social climate plan in time, but we still have high hopes in the technical support instrument experts, and that the state administration will improve the participatory discussion and involve those stakeholders and finalize it in a good way.
Thank you so much, Juraj. Before moving on to the questions on the chat, I would like to ask some specific questions to you regarding the, let's say, the main pillars of the social climate plans. And I'm also would like to invite Andrea for this discussion. So as it was already touched, it's not only an option, but it's an obligation according to the regulation that an estimate of the likely effect of the increase of the price through the ETS2, it has to be included in the social climate plan. So if you can give some insights that how you see this this impact. It was already touched through the presentation, and I see that there was some question which also regarding the price, the ETS2 price that you assumed. I think so probably that question partially can be also answered here.
Shall I take this one?
Yes, please. But yeah, I also invite Zuzana and Juraj if you have like other inputs on that.
Yeah, so in our case, so we are helping member states with climate plans, which has to be developed according to the Commission regulation, and the price of 60 euros is the maximum price they would consider, because this is what is set in the regulation. This is the price that is the Commission is putting forward. This is the expectation for the high end of the ETS2 prices. Obviously, there are, to some extent, there could be the possibility that this price is higher, although I'm not entirely familiar with this aspect, but I do understand that there are some mechanisms to regulate, to avoid this happening too quickly. Now, that's always possible. I would say the impacts in general, we can assume that they scale with the price. So we also looked at, for example, the case for a price of 30 euros per ton, and I say the impacts of 60 are not twice as much, because we expect at least a minimum level of consumer reaction to the increased price, so by decreasing consumption. So this means that overall the consumption reduce and the impact in terms of increased cost reduce. So the impact is less than double, but I would say you can expect that to happen in most cases. So doubling of the price, let's say the impact may increase by 80 to 90%.
Thank you, Andrea. I don't know if Juraj or Susanna, you would like to add something on that one. Okay, so if we move on to the, let's say, next obligation, like defining the target vulnerable group. Susanna, you already mentioned that it was not addressed in the Czech Republic, but possibly if Juraj or Andrea, you can add on that one. I think it would be also very useful for the other participants.
Yes, so I can, or Juraj, can I jump in? Yeah, just let me maybe give you a bit of context of our country. So actually in Czechia, there are about 1.3 million people caught in energy poverty, and the number of inhabitants in Czechia is about 10.8, I think, million. Comparison, this number, the number of people caught in energy poverty has almost doubled during the last few years. And also in coal regions, for example, we keep struggling with long-term problems, social economic problems. And with this, I wanted to say that we really have to face a lot of things that are rather long-term, and the funds such as Just Transition Fund or Social Climate Fund are not going to save us all, or they are not going to save this problem. So what I wanted to say is that we need to focus much more on finding synergies between climate and social policies and their funding to be very effective when it comes to those funds, but also trying to find other funding, such as, for example, the other rest of emissions allowances in case we really have ETS too in the future. I hope we will. So we have to solve a lot of problems, and I think that we need really good strategy. I think that it's very for Just Transition Fund and the Social Climate Fund is really crucial that European Commission wanted us to provide a plan, so to think about what we need to do in the future, and hopefully we will have quality plan.
And in terms of Slovakia, for example, the main expected social impacts, the Governmental Institute assessed, the Governmental Institute for Environmental Policy assessed the cumulative impacts by 2035 in Slovakia to be around roughly 2%, 2 points increase in inflation. So it really depends on the different households. So I think the technical support instruments experts did a really great job by defining and showing different categories. Like, for example, the share of the Slovak household population deemed vulnerable to the energy poverty really differs if we speak about densely populated areas, intermediate or sparsely populated areas. For example, in terms of the densely populated, we speak about 0.7% to 1% of people, and the 1% is if we have the price of 60 euros per ton of CO2. And but if we speak about the sparsely populated areas, then we have with the current prices around 6.5% of people in energy poverty, and with the 60 euros per ton of CO2, we have around up to 9.8% of people. So it's really a big difference if the people live in rural or urban areas. And this is the same also for transport poverty, where we have this, but unfortunately Slovakia still lacks the definition of energy and transport poverty officially. So in the next couple of weeks, we hope that the Ministry of Economy will present it, and we will see how it looks like. For example, in terms of local solutions, we try to somehow circumvent the definition of energy poverty and transport poverty for other programs, which were targeting, for example, from the Recovery and Resilience Plan. We try to identify what could be the measures by just identifying them with different tools, and there were some efforts which we can build on for the social climate plan from European Structural Investment Funds and the Recovery and Resilience Facility. We also did energy audits in multi-apartment buildings and social service facilities. And I think this is very interesting to find out that, for example, in Slovakia, we have 1 million individual houses roughly, and renovating only 8% of them will cost around 800 million euros. And if Slovakia wants to use the direct income support, 37.5% of the total allocation, then it will be another 600 million euros, which could be in total 88% of the whole allocation of the social climate fund. So we would have only 12% to solve the transport poverty, and we still have 76,000 multi-apartment buildings where it's more efficient to live and have in the urban areas where lower economic and environmental impacts. We did also comparison of the economic and maximum energy savings variant in energy with energy audits in social service facilities like crisis intervention centers, and the value for money in renovating them starts at 523 euros per person, which gets benefits of the social climate fund. In comparison, the renovating individual houses, there are the benefits, there is the value for money much lower, where we can only support fewer people, like for example 1 to 5 people in one family house, and then we will need to spend 2,000 to 10,000 euros per person by renovating individual houses. So one of the recommendations I would like to share is that it will be really great to focus on multi-apartment buildings and social service facilities, which have a really higher value for money in terms of the renovation and how many people we can help with the social climate fund.
Thank you, Juraj. I don't know if Andrea, you would like to add on that one.
Maybe I can add a couple of points. So vulnerability is a very specific concept in the context of the regulation. So as part of this project, we say some member state, okay, you may have a definition of vulnerable energy vulnerable households. That does not apply. Vulnerability in the context of the social climate fund is about very specific characteristics. So it's about being low and lower middle income, is about being directly affected by ETS2, and is about not being able to invest to mitigate these impacts, for example, invest in energy efficiency and so on. So there is this discrepancy with the definition that some member state may have. Is not a 100% match. It's a good match with energy poverty, but not necessarily. And there is also the, let's say, an important consideration. So the plan is about accessing the social climate fund, which has very strict eligibility criteria. But all member states are going to get quite a lot of money, not as part of the fund, but simply money out of ETS2 revenue. That is additional to the plan. Now, the impact, we assess the impact of the entire plan, and we are assessing to what extent we can mitigate this impact, but with a fraction of the revenue of the plan. So the higher the ETS2 price, the higher will be the money available for member state to carry out this sort of intervention. And in some member state, we see that still less efficient housing, for example, they're not exclusively for lower income households. Actually, sometimes more affluent households tend to live in bigger houses, maybe old, more classical buildings, and they tend to be quite inefficient. So they actually are going to be the worst affected. Now, the fund cannot support them, and the cost to renovating this would be significantly high. But if targeted well, the fund should alleviate the impact for the for those that need it the most.
Thank you so much. And if I can also add on that one, so we also see that how challenging is to allocate this money to those who are really like directly affected by ETS2. But I would like to also highlight the importance of taking care of those who are indirectly affected by ETS2. So I'm the EUKI funded project that I'm presenting, BioJust. So we are focusing on the biomass user households. So, but we see that how the firewood price, it's really in connections with the price of the natural gas. So we also expect that the firewood price will also be higher. So that's why it's also important. And if we are looking at the vulnerable households, the most popular fuel is biomass, in fact, and we know that it's even though it's renewable, it's not carbon neutral, and also it's very air polluting, unfortunately. So. But yeah, it's at least it's a good sign that in the EC guide it's also highlighted this issue, and they also recommended member states to include or they can include biomass user households. And I think another good example of those group which can be indirectly affected, it's those transport users who don't own an own car, but obviously they will also affected by the higher public transport price. Okay, if we can move on to the measures and investments, I would like just to ask you regarding the two main areas, so the buildings and the transport. Jura, you also already mentioned that, so if we would like to address the vulnerable households, like at least 80% of the money already spent. So if you have any insights or experience that how member states are willing to allocate or divide the money between these two categories, I think it would be also very useful.
Mm-hmm. We only have seen a long list of the measures in Slovakia. So we have a list of different measures presented by the TSI experts, which include renovating individual houses, also program for residential houses, renovation of social housing, and also renovation of social services, and in the public buildings, including non-public providers. There also are proposed measures for development of new social housing in apartment buildings owned by municipalities and the non-profit sector, for example, for people who live in pensioners who cannot afford to live in the individual homes. So if they would have opportunity to live in a social housing, that would be really great to support as well. There is also a proposed measure of a self-help or self-paced construction of family houses, which is used mostly for segregated communities to build their own houses, but we will see if this will remain also in the short list. And there are also different measures proposed for replacement of fossil fuel heating systems at community level. So hopefully we will not switch from natural gas to unsustainable amounts of biomass burning, but also there would be some heat pumps and other technologies which are more sustainable in terms of air pollution and climate perspective. And then there are also promoting of renewable energy sharing and energy communities, installation of solar installations, and some public-private partnerships. But probably the most important point I wanted to raise and the measure is the advice, technical assistance provided by one-stop shops. And we really recommend that they combine the one-stop shops in cities with to make it more effective with established social service programs and community centers to ensure to reach the vulnerable households. Because many households exposed to structural vulnerabilities really lack the financial means and time to commute to urban offices for advice on the Social Climate Fund. So this really needs to be combined, because only having offices for 80,000 people in the cities is not the best measure to target actually the rural population. So we really need to combine these, and this is one of the key measures and that needs to be implemented in line with the revised renewable and the revised energy efficiency directive and energy performance of buildings directives. I think this would make one of the highest impacts to use also the established programs from European structural investment funds, from social measures, and so on.
Thank you, Jurar. Zsuzsanna or Andrea, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd say they're all very valid points. I fully subscribe all of them. So as part of the work on the measure that we're doing, we're also trying to find a way to address some of the issues that you raised. For example, the ability to walk into a one-stop shop, for example, via automated identification. So if you qualify for a benefit, or if you are already on a certain program, you can be automatically included into the scheme, of semi-automatically, let's say. You could be actively targeted by whoever is administering the scheme to receive the benefit rather than the other way around. And this would avoid some of the issue related to access to the one-stop shops and to advisory, but also online access for the vulnerable groups with their limited IT skills.
Thank you. Then I would like to move on the last, let's say, specific question that I think it would be good to touch on for sure. It's easy direct income support. So we know that there is a maximum, I think around 38% that member states can use for direct income support. Andrea, you already mentioned that it has to be spent specifically on by mitigating the impact of ETS2. I saw one question that I think is really relevant regarding this topic. It's the immense effect of ETS2. So looking at the measures, and so it's really takes time to have any kind of impact. So first of all, what do you think about the direct impact support? And what do you think, is it any other solutions that can have other immediate help?
Maybe I can start. So direct income support can be, I think it's probably the measure with the most immediate effect. So I think it should be included. But it's also a measure that comes with caveats. So it can reach 37.5% in the first year, but then the expectation is that it should decrease over time. So by the 2032, it's supposed to be significantly below that. So there is this, so it's important, but it has to be part of a broader scheme and really targeted to, especially to help the delay that there may be in terms of putting in practice the measure and seeing their effect on the affected households. So yeah, I would say should be targeted, but it can also be targeted to other users that are, for example, transport or energy poor, so even not directly affected. But it should be, let's say, part of a broader plan. Again, it could be about you receive this type of direct income support up to the point in which you receive another type of support via the plan. And at the point you are out of it, so that the funds can reduce over time. That could be, that seems to be a easy strategy to address it. And I would say probably, let's say, I'm going to throw it out there, not clearly a measure, but something that has been considered. So ETS2 is a tax on energy, but member states already have quite a lot of taxes on energy. So some are considering reducing some part of the current tax and replacing them with the ETS2. So instead of having a liter-based tax, they would have a carbon-based tax, which would basically reduce the ETS2 impact or nullify them, so the cost will stay the same. The revenue will still come to the state, but it would be, this type of measure would encourage a fuel shift, because obviously it would be levied only on fossil fuel, not on non-fossil fuel-based fuels and energy. So, you know, that there are big measures, they're not part of the plan, but to some extent, I think they are being considered for particular category, particular region in some states.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Susanna, please come. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, currently I was part of many discussions about direct income, and to be 100% honest, I'm not really sure about this one. When I think about complex problems such as energy poverty or transport poverty, I would also like to address the very cause of the problem. However, solving the root cause of the problem may not be 100% fair, as not everyone will be part of the investment solution, or there is also the time aspect, that some solutions are short-term, some solutions are long-term, and you may just be in problems quite quickly. So I don't have really answer yes or no. However, I think that a social climate fund is quite of course it's a lot of money. However, taking into consideration that we have to solve a lot of problems, especially in Czechia, also in other countries, but I'm focused on Czechia. So I see that we really struggle with energy crisis, and I think that it is, as Andrea already mentioned, we really need more money for social and climate things, and we really need to have more money and to use the rest of the ETS2 system very efficiently and meaningfully. And this will be part of the discussion after we really come to the ETS2 operation, I hope, and this will be crucial. However, to give you current information from the Czech Republic, I feel that it looks like we are not going to go through direct incomes, because Ministry for Environment doesn't look like they would like to choose this way. They would rather choose to invest, and this may change. I'm not sure, but this is the current state.
Thank you. Juraj, I see you raise your hand.
I wanted just to add that I'm also still thinking what would be the ideal position on this, and I also have to admit that I'm really biased in this term because Slovakia spent 5 billion euros in fossil fuel subsidies in the last 15 years. So just recently, the Slovak National Bank assessed that Slovaks only save fossil gas when the winters are mild. And in comparison to Czech Republic, which has not subsidized the energy prices so much, we like the Czechs decreased the gas consumption by 30% compared to Slovaks, which so we spent 5 billion euros on fossil fuel subsidies, and it does not decrease the fossil gas dependency on imports so much. And on the other hand, I assume that when in the start of the social climate fund spending, there could be periods where they will use the direct income support during the period when they will still preparing the programs to commence and to really take place and start spending the money for the energy and transport poverty solution. So I was just thinking if there could be a possibility to target those in energy energy poverty, or those the most vulnerable with the direct income support, and those who have the means to invest with investment support, but it has to be somehow connect, if I understand the regulation correctly, that the direct income support has to be also connected with the investment measures. So I think there would be a combination of approaches from different countries, and there is still a lot of work to be done. And I hope that the regional, local, and international experience will give us some more insights and some more good practices to implement also in Slovakia.
Thank you, Juraj. So now I would open the floor for everyone, and we can also answer some questions. I saw that Teodora Peneva, you raised your hand before, and I'm not pretty sure if it's connected to the direct income support or other topic.
Thank you, Adam. It's another topic.
Okay, so if I may suggest, then first we would go through on those questions which in the chat, and then so please come in later and you can share your thoughts. So I would highlight two questions which related to transport. So one was that, Andrea, you mentioned, I think it was very interesting about the collective measures and with the transport, and I think it's also in terms of like allocating the money wisely. It's not easy when we know that any kind of investments in public transport can be very costly. So there was one question that sorry, I'm trying to find it. I think it was about so how you are trying to really address this issue that only the vulnerable groups are benefited from this kind of support. And the other comment or questions was from Zsuzsanna Koritar regarding the electric vehicles as a most preferred measures and investments. It seems that yeah, it can be very costly as well. And so what is your assumption that what was the reason behind that it was ranked so high?
Okay, yes, so I can try. Let's start with the first. So in terms of collective measure, now we're looking at this in two ways. One, there may be indicator that support that development of a certain measure. So there was the case of the of a cycling path, of a cycling route in a certain area. Now, if the member state has good data showing that certain areas are significantly affected by access to public transport and, for example, high car dependency and high fuel cost across the entire area. Now, they may not be all vulnerable to ETS2 because of their income, but actually the improving micromobility transport in the area, that is going to benefit a lot of those that actually cannot afford the vehicle or that can or that struggle to pay for the fuel cost. So there is an argument to be made there. Besides that, there is the possibility to use the SEF only to part fund the measure. So the analysis could show that a certain measure would cost a certain amount, of which a certain part will be financed by the SEF, and that corresponds to the expected share of vulnerable or transport poor user of that specific infrastructure. So there are these, let's say, two aspects that can be used to make the case for such a measure to be funded. And we know that several member states are indeed considering the part funding of a transport infrastructure, linking it, for example, to transport voucher in the case of public transport. So new bus routes with voucher for the poor. Sorry, I forgot the second question. Can you remind me that?
It was about the electric cars.
Oh, yes. So there is actually, this is where the NSH come into play besides the besides the expensiveness. So the NSH, the electric car needs to meet some requirement, not just being electric, needs to meet some requirement, which means actually there would be slightly more targeted approach to that than just an electric vehicles. But besides that, the measure could be part funding of the measure, could be just a grant for the purchase, not the entire price. Or it could be about electric vehicles, which are not necessarily cars. It could be bikes or micro cars and so on. So to make it again more better related to the impact. Other potential for this measure, we are looking, for example, at leasing schemes or electric vehicle linked to on demand. So electric vehicle, for example, as part of car sharing with vulnerable user having preferential access, or electric vehicles for micro enterprises with, for example, particular support for those micro enterprises operating in local public transport.
Thank you. Susanna, I see that you would like to add on that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I wanted to add something to the energy, to the transport poverty. Actually, it was quite funny that one of my colleagues who is qualified psychologist and now works as a sociologist, and deals with social climate fund. He said that we are trying actually to find the right kind of therapy, but we haven't found the diagnosis yet. And I think that when it comes to electric vehicles, I actually don't really like the idea that the one who is transport poor is the one who doesn't have vehicle or who doesn't have money for gas for vehicle. I don't think that's the same. And I think that we have to have good solutions that are related to accessibility and also, of course, money for low income people that can be, saved by energy efficiency and public transportation, progress in public transportation. And I saw in one of the last document that we also consider to have some extra allocations for vouchers for families to buy electric vehicle from Social Climate Fund, and I'm not really a big fan of that at all, actually.
Thank you. I see hands. So first, I would like to give the floor to Theodora because she was the one who raised her hand first.
Thank you, Adam. I just wanted to share some of our experience here with the identification of vulnerable groups, because we had the chance to implement the project financed by ECF, which finished last year, and we made mapping on the energy vulnerability in Bulgaria. I don't know if you're interested in it, but it clearly takes indicators from the energy efficiency module of CEUK for 2023 and combines other annual indicators from the National Statistical Institute, which many of them are on poverty, on unemployment, and incomes, people, number of people below the official poverty line. And it gives a really good picture, and it's a really good indicator for what type of measures are more appropriate for which district. I don't know if you're interested, maybe we can show it in detail sometime, next time on some other meeting. The problem is, again, you already mentioned it in the discussion, in the presentations, many of you, that we still have no impact assessment, and I count very much on the on this data and the results of it, because they will show exactly the specific numbers and the specific impact. And I mean, we have all this data, and I think that it's a problem to organize it in some structured way and use it. And I don't know how much of the countries are doing this. I know that 10 of the member states had some support from the trinomics, but it's still not available, as I know. So probably it will be very much more efficient to know how to use this data afterwards, and to make us another meeting with all this data. As for Bulgaria, I also wanted to say that although we don't have the technical support, we have already published the definitions for energy and transport poverty for public consultation. And the end of the public consultation is today. So we are quite ahead with this topic, but the only problem is that none of the NGOs and other organizations is participating in the process. So this is all I wanted to share. And I would be very much interested to know how to see the impact assessment and measures assigned based on the vulnerability patterns in the countries.
Thank you, Theodora. Regarding the methodology that you use, I think the best would be if you have any kind of link that you can share, if you put it into the chat. And I'm not sure if any of you, Andrea, Zana, or Yura, you would like to add on that or answer. If not, and I see that we don't have so much time left, and I see that Zahar Marian already raised his hand, and it was also some chat discussions. So please, if you can come in and raise your questions and comments.
Hi, I'm Marian. I assume we're speaking about me. I just wanted to kind of follow up on the question I posed there in the chat relating to the shortlisting exercise that will need to happen at some point. I'll be extremely interested in, how does the shortlisting exercise make sense for you, and what might be the benefit out of it in case specifically for Slovakia, when we are lacking, the basic data to be able to, identify the specific, people or households or the companies that would be targeted for the, beneficiaries of this program or the fund. And I'm asking because I've participated on one of the discussions that happened last month, where there were, the measures presented, and the impression I got is that there is not really, we don't have any criteria, the database criteria based on which we will be able to choose between them. And I'm just asking this because as we are, setting the policy for quite a huge sum of financial resources, it would be great to, be very cautious about how to do it. Because obviously, one criteria is political decision, which is great, but not the optimal type of decision making. I'll be really interested in how you are thinking about doing this, because or helping the countries that are, lacking the proper data for making the database decisions, so that we will have the optimal or the best possible decisions. So I just wanted to reiterate the question and open it, especially from people from Trinomics.
Thank you. Yes, is a good question. How do you make the optimal decision when you have limited data? I think that applies to probably 99% of policy making. The data is never enough and the picture is never clear. Now, we can have some perfect information now, and this could be completely, let's say, completely different from the system that we will have in 3 years, where where the ETS2 will be fully in place, right? So is always looking at the future, is always looking with limited information. Now, as part of this work, we have created some analysis. There is something, and actually we do have some charts from our reports I can see in the chat. So I say what we have is better than nothing, but we keep stressing this, that the choice of measure can use our analysis, which is based on imperfect data, but it should be in the hand of the expert, which are the national authorities, with the input from the stakeholder community. Besides that, as part of our work, we have actually brought up what are the data gaps. Now, between now and the implementation of the ETS2, member states can and should put in place processes to improve this data collection. And final points, when we assess the measure, we are looking at the overall picture across the country. We're not looking household by household. Household by household data to, for example, target a measure to the right ones, that can be collected at the moment you are giving out the funds, at the moment you are setting up the measure. So you can have a measure which is about funding a few hundred kilometers of cycling path in the plan with clear criteria that this will be allocated for those communities which, for example, have very poor access to public transport and other characteristics. And then you have two or 3 years to collect very precise data where these communities are. This is actually part of the implementation. Now you have the fund, start investing to better plan for your measure. And actually this delay is, I think, is going to be very beneficial to making sure that these measures are much better targeted, much more effective, and much better, and achieve much better the objectives. Please.
Yeah, I obviously understand, because I'm not working in the public sector for 3 days, so I understand the lack of the data that is basically inherent, definition of public sector. I'm just asking in the context of kind of push to pre-select shortlisted measures? That's the question, because that's one option, right? The second option is, okay, we will not do the very small shortlist, because the current pressure is to create, or my understanding at least, because we are not really having any intense discussions with the national authorities, is the impression that, okay, there is a pressure, okay, we need to choose 3 to 5 measures that will be the most relevant for the country. And the question is like whether that makes sense. Obviously, we need to, you know, have some list that would not entail 500 measures. That's obviously the case, but whether it makes sense for pushing towards really short list, because obviously at some point if you're piloting some, you know, measures, you need to assess whether, you know, what makes sense, where's the highest impact, where's the, you know, with the most value for money. And I'm just fearing that if the shortlist would be too short, we would miss some options that might be relevant. And at some time, as you said, for example, after 3 years, we'll realize, okay, the biggest value for money and the biggest impact lies in different measures that we expected. But we would not have this analysis if we just, you know, push towards having, you know, shortlist of 5 measures, right? So that's the kind of high level discussion, and that's what I'm fearing that might happen in Slovakia, that we will choose based on, you know, very limited amount of data, measures that we assume might be relevant, but at the end of the day, they might not be, and will be no, you know, way of basically going back and, you know, redesign it, because we've already chosen a few measures in the shortlist. So that's the fear I'm just having. Maybe I'm the only one. Sorry to disturb everyone with these kind of potentially non-relevant fears. I'm just, you know, putting it on the table.
I mean, I would say it's relevant, but I don't think there is any solution for that. The plan is to have a maximum funding, which is part of the regulation, and well, there has to be a process to select this measure. We propose going from a long list, narrow it down, the better we understand what this measure will look like. Will we miss some relevant one? 100% sure. Do we have any other way to do it given the limited resources, the limited time, the limited information? I'm not sure we do. But I think you make a valid point. Can this plan be reviewed? I think I don't know if to what extent this is possible out of the regulation. I don't have this particular, but I assume it will not be impossible to change one measure with another, or to include the measure that you think of, this is a really good measure, well, use some other finance to do it. That's always possible.
Thank you. We really need to wrap up because time's up. I think it was also very interesting part of the discussions. Just very quickly, because I don't want to like left it unanswered, this question. I think it's pretty important regarding it. It was a follow-up questions regarding transport. If you are aware of any plan to include large-scale infrastructure projects, and I think there is one interesting comment which is connected to that about the risk of corruption. So do you see that is it something that we need to consider? And very quickly, if you have any kind of reaction or not.
I mean, I can say that yes, some member state is considering large-scale infrastructure, but as I say, that it will be part funded with the SCF, so not fully funded, but together with other EU funding plus national funding is a contribution to create large-scale, usually public transport infrastructure. You can see some member state attempted to include some road type of work. The Commission wasn't thrilled about this opportunity, I must say. So this is all I can say about large infrastructure. On corruption, I cannot say about that. That's not something that we looked at. That's always possible, I would say. It's not. Don't think the SCF is the instrument to solve that issue.
Okay, thank you, Andre, and thank you all. I would like to thanks again for the speakers for your very valuable insights, and also for the participants for your very active participation. I have the feeling that if we would have one additional hour, it wouldn't enough. But let's hope that we can continue in this discussion in another occasion. And yeah, let's push for a very meaningful and inclusive social climate plan. So thank you so much again. You know, this webinar was recorded, so you can rewatch it if you missed something important. And I would like to highlight the opportunity and ask you to fill this evaluation survey that was just shared in the link. It really helps the EUKI team to further improve the EUKI seminars. And yes, please, yeah, keep up the good work, and thank you so much. And I wish you a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much, Adam.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.